Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode, and I've got a fantastic guest for you today. I'm always scouring the globe looking for stories of inspiration, motivation, wisdom to bring it back and share with the audience. So today I have Nico, and he is an athlete. He's overcome struggles, and now he helps others. He's an author, he's a consultant, he's a speaker, and what I love about this is his mantra is don't try to be perfect, just do better. And for all the audience, a lot of the audience suffers from perfectionism, so it's going to be a great discussion on how to do better. So, Nico, welcome.
Thank you for your opening up your platform, Doctor. I appreciate it.
This podcast is very genuine and authentic, so we get rid of the titles. We just talk to each other like human beings. So, kind of talk about your story and your how you came to help others achieve the same.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Chris, the story begins probably when I was 6 years old. Like most of us, that's where a lot of the complexities begin, is when we're children and we don't understand the world in a way that we can frame it. And so we begin to frame it and put it in different boxes. One of the boxes that I framed incorrectly was my familial situation. I got a younger sister, and she's a couple years younger than me, but she was very ill when she was within her first year. So the doctor said she wouldn't live past the first year of her life, which put some stress on my family.
Yeah.
That caused me to go stay with my grandparents just because they wanted to help out, wanted to relieve some of that stress from my parents. Well, for me, the way that I framed that was rejection. That's where a lot of my root issues started, was not feeling accepted, not feeling approved, not feeling validated, feeling like I was doing something wrong, right? Thinking that I had messed up somehow. The reality is, it's just the way the world works sometimes, right? And about 6 years old, I lost my grandpa, my papa, and that's when I had to reframe again. I had to understand, like, hey, people aren't around forever, and you have to grow up kind of quick in that type of situation. So that's where the story kind of begins. That's where I framed this idea that I wasn't accepted, and I started to do everything that I possibly could to be accepted, right? It seemed like dealing with change was difficult. It always seemed like there was a problem that needed to be solved. And if there wasn't a problem that needed to be solved, then I would create one just so I could solve it. And then if there wasn't a problem to be solved or change to manage, then I was always wondering, am I doing things right, and am I being accepted? So that's where my root issues kind of stemmed from. I was blessed enough to find a outlet in wrestling. So I started wrestling when I was 7 years old, and I was excited. You could beat up on somebody and not get in trouble. Like, that was a wonderful experience for me. It was great to be able to make people hurt physically the way that I hurt emotionally, if that makes sense. So being able to choke someone out and watch their eyes dilate, have their parents yelling for them to let go of my kid, like, that was exciting for me. I got the attention that I wanted to get by doing that. And that was my outlet from 7 to 14. And then at 14, I found another outlet, and that was in substances, drugs. I loved drugs because first time that I got high, I realized, oh, this is what everybody else must feel like. There's an out of body experience that I was like, this is what normal is. And the reality is that's not what normal was, but that's how I had framed it in my head. And because that's how I framed it in my head, that's what I continue to do. And if you have any experience with substances or drugs, or any of the audience does, then you know that just one isn't enough. There's always something better. There's always something greater. That's kind of the starting point of most of my journey. Was between 7 and 14, and the experiences that I just described.
Really, you impact a lot there, and a lot to just digest. And one thing that I talk about is this, you're right, it all starts in childhood. It's like it's just emotional trauma, and we all have it. Nobody's immune to it. And it's some of it's like unintentional, like parents don't realize what they're doing. But so you have these different outlets, and how does this reframe it in terms of how you was it an escape, or was it something to soothe, or was it something that you felt like to cure? Kind of talk about that, and we're going to talk about how you manifest, in terms of the emotional trauma there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was soothing. That's the word that stands out. Soothing
Mm-hmm.
was the way that wrestling helped me out. It was really exercise is what was soothing. I just
Mm-hmm.
associated it with wrestling. And then after that, substances were soothing because I have a brain that just moves 1,000 miles an hour. And
Uh-huh.
it's
Uh-huh.
moved that quick since I was young, always
Yeah.
thinking about the next action, always thinking about the next play, always thinking about the next thing.
Yeah.
And with a mind that's constantly moving, it can create not even a headache, not even a migraine, but just mind pain. And that mind
Mm-hmm.
pain, when I explored with cannabis, when I explored with other substances, I just realized, oh, this is slowing me down. So the
Mm-hmm.
depressants is what I found would give me that soothing relief of mental overload. I
Mm-hmm.
like to describe it as a car that's just going 100 miles an hour all the time. It
Yeah.
needs some sort of rest. And the
Yeah.
only rest that I got wasn't even in my sleep. It was either wrestling or getting high. That's the only time I
Oh,
could kind of take off my foot off the throttle. And by
yeah.
taking my foot off the throttle, that's what was soothing. And
Oh,
the other side was a coping mechanism. Not having
oh,
proper coping mechanisms, i.e., talking to somebody. Um, at that age, you don't know how to describe some of these things, right? Your vocabulary, other than it hurts. Like when you say it hurts, is it a sharp pain? Is it a sore pain? You
mm-hmm.
don't have a way of describing those to somebody, so it just hurts. And if people don't understand why it hurts, it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
express it when you don't have an additional vocabulary to use. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying, "Hey, my heart hurts because I'm missing somebody," "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
my feelings are hurt by these actions that someone else took," or "Hey, this situation made me feel uncomfortable." Without that, all you know how to say is it hurts, and you just point to it, right? It hurts, and it hurts in my head, it hurts in my heart, it hurts in my spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
that coping mechanism of being able to vocabularily express it, either speaking it to somebody, writing it, or reading it, was not available. I hadn't explored those ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so the coping mechanism was get high or uh, exercise.
It's quite interesting because your description reminds me of the audience, and a lot of them they turn to success and achievement, which you found in wrestling, in sports, and a lot of the they find success in careers or their status, so, something to run away and like workaholics. So one thing that's interesting is you broke out of this, and there's a pivotal moment, there's a mind shift that helped you to break free from this cycle and live towards helping others. Well, describe that moment.
Yeah, for me, that moment of breaking out of the cycle came from what some individuals would call rock bottom. At that point in my life, we would have to fast forward till I was about 22 years old, and I stopped smoking and I started injecting heroin. So
Mm,
at this time, I used everything that I possibly could think about. Right, I went
mhm,
through all of the scales, and if we're talking about high achievers and we're talking about individuals who associate their identity with titles,
mm,
those titles, think about it as you're the CEO of an organization, right? Like that's the highest that you can get. For
mhm,
me, the highest that I could get was IV injection of a very hard narcotic. And when
mm,
I did that, and it still wasn't giving me a return, it still wasn't fulfilling all of my internal needs. That's when I realized there's got to be something else out there. There has to be, because I can
mm,
see other people living joy, living happiness, feeling love, having pride in who they are,
mhm,
enthusiastic. And I'm over here feeling shame and guilt, regardless of the amount of substances that I put into my body. And
mhm,
even now, having the title of author, business owner, I got like DISC certifications. I got all these titles, right? And none of those give me validation personally, because I've learned to validate myself through day to day habits. And so that's where that pivotal moment came from. That pivotal moment came from what is the hardest thing for me to do. And for me, the hardest thing to do at that point was not use any type of drugs, not use any type of substances. And when I found myself going, I started off with hours without using, hours without even thinking about planning to use, hours without trying to use, hours without trying to run a new scheme. That's when I started to feel confident about who I was, because it's an identity of not in a title, not in a substance, not in an external thing. I talk about substances because that's my realm, that's where I come from. But in my exploration of human beings, I meet individuals who are shopaholics. I meet individuals like you just described who are workaholics. Yeah. And that is an external validation point. You're chasing after something in order to fulfill that internal void. Well, is there other ways to fulfill that void? And that's what I started to explore. I'd already gone to the full extent that I could do with drugs, and it wasn't giving me anything. So as your audience might be sitting there listening to me, well, I don't do drugs. Great. But are you trying to get to the highest point of your company? Are you trying to get into that next highest achievement? And is that going to make you feel better in your head? And if your answer immediately is yes, I challenge you, is that going to emotionally make you feel better? Is that going to drive your spirit to make you happier? Are you going to wake up in the morning excited once you've made that achievement? Because the achievement doesn't mean anything. That can be taken away immediately, especially if it's at an organization. You know, that organization can shut down. Companies can shut down. They can fire you. So what happens when that situation comes about? If you can validate yourself and give yourself your own approval and create that internal oomph, that internal excitement, that internal, man, I am who I'm supposed to be, regardless of any titles, regardless of any achievements. That's where that pivotal moment will change. So for me, it came from waking up in a Walmart parking lot that I had slept in that night inside my truck and wondering, well, what the heck am I going to do now? I just used a gram of heroin, slammed it into my body. I don't have anything else to do. I don't have any other achievements. So I decided, let's go the opposite way. Let's see what's going to happen when I stop. Let's see what I can get done when I stop. And if you are an individual who is seeking high achievements, what if you create your own achievement? That's something that I'm working through right now. What is my own product that I would love to have? And for me, that's the next version of myself. And a bunch of different realms that I function in, and those just real quickly to give you an idea of what might be leading you, your faith, your family, your fitness, your finances, your freedom. I think freedom is one of my biggest areas that I focus on, because this time that we're spending right now, Chris, is going to be the only time that we spend on this day. So if you can use that idea of, well, what would make me the most free in this time, and drive that home, that right there is what will change your mindset. And that was pivotal to me, because then I understood at 22 years old, I'm only going to be 22 one time. I'm going to be 23 one time. And fast forward, I'm now in my 30s. I remind myself, Nico, you're only going to be 34 one time. So how do you want to live this day? And that's what was pivotal to me, exploring what made me excited to be me.
Very powerful, because I know secretly, like a lot of my colleagues, they're very, like, they've reached this pinnacle, and then a lot of them secretly cope with alcohol, drug abuse, infidelity. Their kids hate them. They're divorced. From the outside looking in, you'd think they had everything. And then what's really interesting is this idea of perfectionism. And I've really been fascinated with this idea of perfectionism and this idea of imposter syndrome, because a lot of the audience, because they're so successful, and they think that everything's got to be perfect, like everything has to be before they can take a step, or like every day has to be perfect. And then a lot of them, because of these traumas, they don't feel like they're good enough. They always feel like they're imposters, for, like, especially BIPOC, people of color, minorities, never fit into the racial stereotype. So then they achieve this, but they feel like they don't deserve it. So talk about how you used your process of self-discovery to and help others overcome perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and become their best versions?
Absolutely. Let's start with perfectionism. I guess we have to define perfect, because when you can give me a definition of perfect, then we can kind of get a direction of what perfectionism is, right? For me, perfectionism is running a day that I would like to run, if that makes sense. So for me, the most perfect way that I can handle my day is by making sure I do my non-negotiable tasks in the morning. That's what's perfect to me. I don't have to do the tasks perfectly, but a perfect day starts a certain way, right? It doesn't have to have anything included inside of it. And for me, my non-negotiable tasks are prayer. You can supplement that for meditation if you want to, reading and writing, and a workout. Each day they're going to be different because each day you're a different version of yourself. You just had new experiences the last 24 hours. So if you are searching for perfectionism, you're never going to achieve it. You're never going to be the perfect version of you. What you can do is you can take each moment perfectly and string a few moments that are perfect together, and your day just seems to flow. I think for me, perfectionism is the attempt to stay in a flow state when you haven't earned that flow state. That leads me into imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is worth, right? Am I worthy of this? As people of color, we don't believe we're worthy of this because of hundreds of years of different phrases that have been put into our DNA. And my grandparents, they grew up where in the 50s, they weren't allowed to go into certain restaurants, right? Like that was something that was very prevalent to them. They were treated just like Blacks. They were treated just like African Americans because of how dark they were. That just is a small snapshot of what they experienced that they passed on to me because they're very influential. So they taught me, hey, this is how you act in certain situations, because when the police come around you, it's different than when the police come around other individuals. You can't speak Spanish because Spanish is a language that is looked down upon, right? This is where the imposter syndrome comes in, because the worth is below other individuals. And if your worth is below other individuals, well, then you're never going to feel worthy of what you have. You're always going to be seeking some other achievement to say, hey, look, world, I did this. And the reality is the world doesn't care. The world doesn't give 2 sugar honey iced teas and a box of biscuits about you or what you got going on. The world is so self-focused that they want to know how you can contribute to them. So flip that imposter syndrome and flip that perfectionism into a way of, hey, you know what? I'm perfectly going to serve everybody else by being myself. Imposter syndrome is using what you were originally created to do, that little secret that you don't want anybody to know about, that you have like that desire. It might be painting, it might be knitting, it might be being an author, it might be playing the drums. I know a gentleman who went from a 7-figure job at a corporate organization to go start a tattoo shop because that's what he wanted to do. That's what he grew up wanting to be. And so anytime that he was going against that little idea, his childlike idea to be a tattoo artist, he felt like an imposter. And when we got down to the root of it, and we found out that, look, he loved the way that tattoo artists got to interact with individuals. He loved that he got to be a part of someone's life. And he knew exactly what he needed to do. And since then, he's been able to tattoo people, and he's very good at it. So he makes decent money, and he no longer feels like an imposter because you're being the genuine version of you. You're functioning at a frequency where everybody wants to be around you because you want to be around you. Imposters, nobody wants to be around them because they don't even want to be around themselves. Perfectionists, no one wants to be around a perfectionist because you're going to demand perfection and you can't even produce perfection yourself. If somebody can give me a definition of perfect that they're trying to achieve, I guarantee you that will change over time because of new experiences and exposures that they're going to have. Mm-hmm. So if you could create the perfect moment, which is controlling your thoughts, aligning those thoughts with the actions of what you actually want, then you're going to actually be living a perfect life.
Yeah, man, so powerful. I wish we had so much more time because there's so much to dissect there. And man, that's just this is why I love this podcast is we bring on and showcase people that just overcome just obstacles and just created wonderful, these fantastic insights. How can people, I know you've written a book, you coach others, you help others. How can people reach out to you and find out more about you?
Best way to do that is at NoHaloNM.com. Because I don't believe anybody's supposed to be a perfect angel. My coaching program is called No Halo. If you have social medias, I'm on social media at NoHaloNM, or you can shoot me an email. My email is Nico, Nico, that's Nancy Indigo Charlie Oscar at NoHaloNM.com.
And man, for all the audience, let's thank Nico for coming on and giving an inspiring just journey, and as well as these really new ideas on how to overcome perfectionism and imposter syndrome. The role of trauma and guilt and shame. Be sure to give him socials a like and follow, and reach out to him. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.